Welcome to my 1cc tutorial of Expert Mode in Double Dragon Advance. Unlike my previous tutorial on Expert Mode for this game, this is going to actually show my 1cc run, the successful run I had 1cc, which is no continues lost. You can see I set it to 0 continues, so it's just the base lives that you get. I set the lives to 5, which is the max you can set it to, but no continues. Now, I do die 15 times in this run, and, so the way I survive is really off of those one-ups, trying to make it to the next one-up when my lives get low. Now, luckily, my lives don't really start to get low until the semifinal stage, where they get down to about 4 or 5 lives, which is not really that low. It's pretty much your starting lives that you have, but I do get them up as high as 7 or so at their highest. So for this, I'm going to be covering basically the big difference between this and my first Expert Mode tutorial that I made was that tutorial wasn't focused on survival and efficient playing. What that was I did save and load states basically on an emulator, and I would save states before each enemy encounter, basically each group of enemies, and I would really perfect the combat with that group of enemies, and it would be more flashy, with a lot of launching and really precise, taking out guys really fast, things like that. But it wasn't really the most efficient for actually trying to survive on a 1cc, because when you use save and load states, you're not forced to play safe. You can play as risky as you want with save and load states, since you just keep reloading the state and try again until you get a nice looking clean run of a combat segment. So the big difference here is this was done uninterrupted. This was one play session. There was no editing or anything like that. So this is straight through. So whatever fuck ups I make are permanent. You know what I mean? There's no reloading states or anything like that. So the survival tactics are a lot different. So my strategies and my playstyle completely changed as a result. So I figured I'd make a second tutorial and really detail some great stuff to use, in a real run and how to really exploit it. And I also cover an infinite live farming technique that seems to yield infinite lives. It does take really long, but I'm going to cover that later in the video. So as usual, for this first stage, you can spawn groups of enemies slower if you want by by inching the screen just a little bit. You can spawn a few enemies at a time in some parts. If of course. Now, if you're doing Expert Mode 1cc, you're not going to have a problem fighting all the enemies at once in this first stage. So, that's probably not even going to be an issue if you're attempting this. But either way, it's worth trying to cover everything. So, because I'm familiar with the game, I do spawn out a lot of enemies at once because, I can deal with the, you're forced to learn crowd control. And you can see how aggressive these enemies are on Expert. And I got swarmed and almost killed. You can see my health is almost gone from that little swarm. That's how fast you die on Expert Mode. So you can see I got in a bad position, but I was able to get out of it because, I have a lot of strategies that I used by this point in the game on much harder groups of enemies, much more difficult sections. So, but even the first stage does get aggressive, as you can see. And I'm going to be detailing my strategies, and I use a lot of similar strategies throughout, but I really learned to mix up my... Now, see, I stand on top of this guy and punch him as soon as he stands. This is something you can do on just about any enemy in the game if you time it right. And it's not hard to time. The way you time it is, when the enemy is laying flat, you stand on top of him, and as soon as you see him twitch like he's about to stand up is when you start mashing the punch button. Now, also, I do not use a rapid-fire controller for the regular combat in this game at all. The only time I set auto-fire on or rapid-fire on my controller is when I'm doing a technique where I stand on a ledge and continuously kick, which is part of the farming technique, which I'm going to explain later. So, the reason I don't use rapid fire during normal gameplay is because if you do even a single extra strike, you can get completely mobbed on Expert and destroyed, comboed to death, knocked in a pit, etc. The enemies are extremely aggressive, as you can see. So, as usual, you can use the dynamite here to let the guys walk onto it and die. Now, a big part of Expert 1cc runs is trying to get those extra points without really farming, because in this case, this was a no farming Expert 1cc. My first 1cc Expert run, I farmed 8 lives, And, I did win that way, and it was, something legit, you could say, because it's in the game, but it's more of a glitch because the enemies shouldn't have infinite health. So it's a very weird kind of glitch thing, and it wasn't the way I wanted to do my 1cc run. So I was very disappointed with that. I mean, I was happy that I got the 1cc run by any means, obviously, but it defeats the purpose of calling it a 1cc run when you're farming, that many lives. Now, if you want to farm 1 or 2 lives, I think that's pretty legit. I wouldn't really have much of an issue with that. But when you're farming 8 additional lives, that's pretty fucking extreme. That's, almost 2 continues worth of lives. So, yeah, at that point, it's not much of a 1cc as far as I'm concerned. Now, with this part on this conveyor, you stay all the way in the upper right, run to this conveyor in the upper right and stay in that corner. And if you stay up there, a lot of the enemies, it'll trick them. A lot of them will run into the pit, but it varies. Sometimes you can get most of them to run in the pit. Other times, only a few of them will go in. And I don't know exactly why that is, but I try to get as many enemies as possible to go into that conveyor pit. Now, I use launcher combos, which is a uppercut combo followed by a flying knee. It's a little tricky to do because you got to hit B and A at the same time to kneel. Then you got to hit B for an uppercut. Then you got to press B and A again to kneel, and then you got to press A for the flying knee. It's a bit of a difficult combo that'll take a lot of practice. But for me, it's just normal muscle memory because I've done it so many times. And it's really not that hard if you practice it for a while, but it may take a little while to get it down. Now you can see it gets wild and crowded in this area, and what I do is I reset the position a lot of times by moving back down in the conveyor belt area. I'll move all the way to the left and make the enemies come out to the left, then I'll move back to the conveyor belt, hoping that the enemies may run into the hole. But it doesn't always work out that way, and you can see things get really dangerous here. So I do manage to beat this stage without losing a life, but again, it comes very close on this stage, and I almost lost a life very easily on this. This is one of the harder early parts. It's harder in some ways than parts on the third stage. It's pretty tough. It gets wild in here. If the enemies don't go in the conveyor belt, if they don't cooperate with the conveyor belt pit, then it becomes kind of a fucking freak show over here. So there's going to be so many different, crowd control strategies that I'm using that I'm not even going to be able to detail them all. But you can see I can also hit the guys with a spinning jump kick up on the conveyor belt. And a lot of times that will make it so they fall and they go into the pit from the conveyor belt. But not always. Now with these guys that do their punch combos, you want to wait for them to finish a full punch combo, and that's when you attack them. Of course, this guy interrupted it. But the idea is to try to launch them into pits. If I can get him on this conveyor belt, say I got him on the conveyor belt, you want to launch them. That's that double combo launch. Now, if you just do a flying knee and you don't do the uppercut first, see, he walked into the pit. If you don't do the uppercut first, it's very hard to get the launcher. So the flying knee has such a short range that I never use it by itself. I always start off with a uppercut and then I combo the flying knee into the uppercut. That's the only way I found that it's really useful for me. I don't really find it useful because you got to be right up on the guy's ass to get it to land otherwise. So for me, that's a little bit too risky on expert. Now for this part, if you don't fuck it up, you can just fight this one Burmov, the guy with the mask, and one Linda. But if you get knocked to the left side of the screen, or if you go to the left side of the screen too much, you're going to spawn out the rest of the enemies. So just be aware of that. I accidentally spawned all the enemies, but for me it ended up working out because I didn't die and I was able to farm some extra points. The more enemies you fight, obviously, the more points you get. So for the first 20,000 points you get your first one-up. But then after that, it's every 50,000 points for your next one-up. So it's up to you if you want to fight extra guys. And by fight them, I mean there's going to be a lot of parts I show in this tutorial, this run basically, where you can knock a lot of the enemies into pits for instant kills. It's something I do heavily, but the trade-off to that is that if you don't fight all the enemies at once, you're going to be missing a few thousand points for each enemy if you were to just, punch them to death or just combo them to death with whatever, you want to use. Even weapons can give you a lot of points. The nunchucks especially, or the stick weapons, seem to rack up a lot of points since they get a lot of little hits in, which are worth 200 points per strike. Now, it took me about 35 hours and 43 minutes, or maybe it was just under 35 hours, I think, on expert mode before I was able to get this 1cc run with no farming, just a straight 1cc expert run. So, this was a pretty fucking extreme run and playthrough. So it's not going to be an easy thing to do. It's a really specific thing that I'm making a tutorial for, a 1cc expert. Just beating expert, it didn't take me super long, but it was even pretty hard even with 10 credits initially, with the 10 credit code. But then after that, I wanted to do better, so I got it down to 5 credits, and then I just kept working on it from there. And I did a 1cc with lives farming on expert, and then I wasn't happy with that, so then I spent an additional 5 hours to get it without farming lives, since I was so close to doing it anyway. So, usually when you kill the Burmov, then the 2 tuxedo guys will come out, but since I spawned the other enemies, everybody's out at once, so it's getting to be a kind of a circus. It's also, I don't really like having weapons too often when a lot of enemies are out. You'll see I drop the weapons intentionally so I can fight the enemies with my regular moves. You're going to see me grabbing weapons a lot and dropping them a lot for specific fights. I really learned where to use my weapons, where not to use them. So I prefer to fight these guys mostly with, basically what I do is I'll get slightly below or above an enemy and I will launch an uppercut and they'll walk into my uppercut. Now, if I'm not being, mobbed by other enemies, then I may follow up with a flying knee launcher to get some extra damage and to launch the guy out of the way to get him off my ass. But the most effective thing I actually found for playing carefully and doing well in expert mode is just being more patient. You see I did the launch there, but being more patient and just moving slightly up or above the enemy or below the enemy, have them come down you kind of diagonally into your uppercut. And you're going to get used to doing that a lot if you want to play really effectively. You don't just do that for the flying uppercut. You want to do that for punch combos or any other moves you might use. So, it is always dangerous to be directly in front of the enemies because they're so aggressive in expert, as you can see. So, there's a good chance you're going to get hit or comboed when you do that. Now, you can always stand above the guy, and when you see him twitch, that means he's going to get up. When you see that twitch animation, as soon as he's laying down, he's about to get up. So start mashing your punch. And if you're standing above the guy, positioned correctly, he'll go right into your punches. You can even do that with harder enemies. So it's something you can do a lot of. I'm not even going to be able to detail all the various strategies and things that I use because it's just the result of playing for 35 hours and really learning the game. But I will try to break down whatever I can see here and describe. But obviously this is not something where you're going to watch the tutorial and beat it your first time without farming. You know what I mean? It's probably going to take many, many hours. I would assume most players would take a while on this. So, as I said, what I was doing is moving slightly above or below the enemy and then having them walk into those uppercuts. And I only use the flying knee launch part of the combo occasionally. If I do that too often, see what I tried to do when I first beat expert was I tried to hit everybody with the uppercut flying knee combo for every enemy, which it was overkill. It was insane overkill, and it made it much harder. So because I'm really fucking rigid, I had to adapt my playstyle and become more adaptable to the game. So I really wanted to maximize the exploitation of the AI. So I stopped doing that, and I started using what was more effective. And what was more effective was not doing the full, double hit combo of uppercut flying knee. Instead, I just used the uppercut. So most of the time, I move, a little bit below, a little bit above the enemy, and then I have them walk into the uppercut, and then I move up or down immediately. I don't stand there. So I'm constantly moving up or down to shift the enemy's movement, and I want them to walk into my attacks. But now it is, if you're good with the sticks, you can start using them on this part of the stage and taking out the enemies. I don't like using a stick when there's, a shit ton of enemies at the same time. I like to thin them out a little bit, but I have done it with all the enemies on screen. It's just a lot more risky. So it's not something I want to do. Now, so far I haven't died, and I've racked up 7 lives, from the points. But I am going to die once on this stage, unfortunately. But see, you can do the same thing where you have those abobos walk into your uppercut. And if you lose your weapon, you can fight them fine by having them walk up or down in your uppercut, but it's going to be harder. The sticks make them a lot easier because you can kind of just stay back, and they don't have any jump kicks or jumping attacks. So you can stay back and let them walk into the idea is to try to group both of them on top of each other when hitting them. And that'll make it a lot easier to take both of them out at the same time. So I dropped the sticks here because I want to fight these guys with just uppercuts by moving up and down. This is my fucking bread and butter strategy that I use pretty much for most of the game. Once I got used to using this is the way I dance around with a lot of the enemies. Now there are parts when my strategy requires weapons. That's near the end of the game. I used to on stage 6 require myself to have a weapon for my strategy, but I learned how to play it way better without any weapons by using the pits. And I'm gonna go into that in more detail later. Headbutts are good for a quick knockback, as you see me using, but a lot of times I do them accidentally. One of the best ways to knock an enemy back is a spin kick, but not running. I don't recommend using the running spin kick often at all because enemies will swat you out of the air. But if you stand in place and just jump to your left or right and you do a spin kick, you will easily take the guys out most of the time, especially if you're slightly below them. It actually has a strange range where it hits a little bit above and below you. So we're going to exploit that later. But here you see I don't really prefer to use the stick when there's all these enemies. I like to just, a lot of times, just use uppercuts and have them go up or down. I do some punch combos as well because they seem to do better damage than just uppercutting. But most of the time, I'm just keeping it simple with having enemies walk down into that uppercut. Now, whenever you punch guys on the ground like that, you don't get any points. So just be aware of that. It's not the best way to damage enemies because you want points when you're going for 1cc. So I try to minimize that. Usually when I do it, it's an accident in this mode. So here I'm pausing the game as I do a few times throughout the run to shake out the numbness in my hands. They go numb sometimes. So now, for this part with this group of enemies, you can stand in the upper left corner all the way. And if you position yourself right, you can keep mashing the button and the enemies will all walk into your stick attacks. And they'll all get defeated. All these stick guys will get killed. But I only did it once, and I didn't actually practice the positioning on that. And I fucked up the second time I tried it, so I just stopped doing that, and I just fight them normally here because I highly recommend keeping your sticks for this stage. Otherwise, it's going to be much harder to deal with the bosses of this stage. So my strategy is to try to keep the sticks for the boss fight coming up. I mean, you can use the uppercut strategy on the bosses, but they block a lot, and they will counter you. So it's better to keep the sticks for this part if you can. Now, the way to keep the sticks is to not be on the left or right edge of the screen when you get hit. Because if you are, a lot of times the sticks will get knocked off screen, and then you can't retrieve them. So if you're about to die, play it safe. Don't, even if you're not about to die, you'll drop the sticks if you get hit and knocked down. So you don't want that. Now, see, I use this corner, this edge of the building right here to have the enemies walk down and line up into the stick attacks. So you can use that whenever you get a chance to try to channel the enemies down into your stick. But I also got good enough to where I'm able to kind of just dance around the enemies, and I don't really need to rely on that. I can, at this point, play it pretty well. And that'll come with, once you learn the AI and you get a feel for how the enemies move and attack. See, I know the enemies are going to do jump kicks, so I usually walk to the left first. That way, if they do a jump kick, they will miss me. So, but see, when they do them off screen, it's tough because you don't see it coming. So you got to be careful with that. That's how I got hit there. I did lose a life on this stage, as you can see. It's tricky to beat this stage without losing a life. I'll usually fuck up on something. The next stage is extremely fucking difficult to not lose a life on. It's one of the hardest stages to not die on. And I'll show that. I actually died twice on the next stage. But yeah, you want to try to get the sticks and try to channel the enemies into those sticks, by having them come into them from an angle. You don't want to fight those guys head on too much because they will do their spin kick move, which will hit you from range. So the idea with this part, it's one of the hardest parts. The idea is to try to use your jumping spin kick. See, it's not the running jump spin kick, but just a regular jumping spin kick to try to... You can also stand over the guys and do that trick that I explained, where they stand up and you just punch them as they stand up, if you have one of them left. But the idea is to try to launch as many enemies off the truck as possible, immediately launching them off. So sometimes, see, I accidentally got the bat there, which fucked up my launch combo, so I wasn't able to launch that guy. I was going to launch him with a uppercut flying knee combo off the truck, but I didn't get a chance to do that. But the idea is to try to launch these guys off mostly with jumping spin kicks when possible. So you're going to see me do that. I try to go to the edge. As soon as you see the enemy disappear, the last enemy, that's when the enemies are going to come out on the right side. And you can knock some of them off immediately with a well-placed spin kick. See, I was able to get a launcher there and launch that guy off. If you knock the guys off that right side of the truck off screen, they will die. Same with the left side. But you don't want to get knocked off either. That's the biggest danger. You can also get comboed very easily by these guys when there's this many of them in a narrow area. That's what makes this area so dangerous, as you'll see, where I'll die twice. It's very easy to die here. I have beaten this truck part without dying, but I think that was only one time that I did that. So it's not something that I could normally do. I have also beaten it just dying once, I think a few times, but I pretty much almost always die on this part. And, if I can get out of here with only dying twice, that's a serviceable run for me. I mean, it's not great, but, this is a part where you kind of expect to lose a few lives. There's just so much shit with all the dynamite and the knockback and everything, you get fucked. See, I already lost 2 lives here, but it's almost done by this point. But the idea, this is not the best demonstration because I fucked up here, but the way, you want to wait for them to stop their punch combo and then you can launch them, which is good if you need to launch them really far to get them off the truck. But the best way to deal with them is to try to use that right edge of the truck and use a jumping spin kick to take them out immediately and knock them off the edge of the truck immediately. Now, these guys, they're really easy, but if you miss a strike, they will hit you with their sword swing, which does huge damage. The red one will actually one-hit kill you with his sword strike. Now, if you want to end this part faster and not farm points, you can try to just take out the red one, and if the red one dies, they all die. But I like to get the points here, so what I do is I single out one at a time to play it safe, and what I'll do is I'll just do regular punches on them and stand above them. So that's where you'll see me do that. I try to bait them to try to swing, and then I'll get in and start punching them, and then I'm standing over them and doing that method that I explained. Now, as it gets close to the edge of the screen, I'll turn to the left a little bit so I can direct the enemy back in the other direction. Otherwise, they go off screen, and then they can definitely hit you. So instead of wasting time on that, I just continue with channeling them in the right direction. All you got to do is punch them once, or even if you inch the screen a certain way, they'll just start coming after you. I try to lure one at a time. It's just easier. I can also get the most points this way because by doing punches, I believe you get more points than if you do more powerful attacks. It seems like you get points per strike. So the best way to get points seems to just do regular punches on them. There's also a kick combo where if you get the guy kneeling over in pain and you press down and kick, when you're real close to the enemy, you'll do a rapid kick on the enemy. That seems to be one of the best ways to rack up points. But for me, it was way too inconsistent. I mean, it would always fuck up for me. I couldn't get it consistently. I really didn't practice it enough as it was something that I tried experimenting with late. So I just didn't find it to be something that I wanted to use. You may want to consider it. But by playing this way, I'm racking up a lot of points by taking them out. I could, of course, fight them all at once, but it's riskier. And, I'm not going to get as many points than if I punch them like this until they die. And it's a very easy way to deal with them. Super low risk. The main challenge of this stage is the truck. The truck is the hardest part in the game. The hardest single part. So, if you can beat that without many lives lost, then, you're doing well. So, it's going to be same strategies as before. You may want to throw the axe at the enemies, but aside from that, I don't like using the axe for attacking the enemies, aside from throwing it at them. Check out my original tutorial for the game as well for some, different strategies, but they're much higher risk. But in that tutorial, I have a full moves list from GameFAQs posted in the description. So if you can either go to GameFAQs or you can just check that video, and you'll see the full moves list. It would be too long for me to go into how to do every move in the game. There's a decent amount of moves that I use. But I do recommend becoming familiar with most of the moves, as most of them are really useful. There are a number of them that I don't even use because I just don't find them useful, but there's a lot of great moves. Initially, I wasn't even using regular punches, and I rarely ever used regular kicks because I was trying to launch all the enemies with that double launch combo, which is a hard combo to do consistently when you're trying to use it for every attack that you do. It's really inefficient to do that. I thought maybe that was the most damage you can inflict, but I'm not sure about the damage values on that. But It's also just very risky to do because when you're constantly going for those launch combos, it's very easy for enemies to interrupt you when you land from the flying knee. You know, you're leaving yourself open a lot when you do that. So I'm a lot more versatile now. But yeah, with these enemies, it's the same kind of strategy of being slightly above or below and, you know, using the uppercuts. You can also just get the whip, and if you're able to group them well, you can just group them with the chain whip. Either way is good. I do drop weapons at certain points of the stage because for some of my strategies, I like to knock enemies into the pit and do some different things. Now you're going to see that sometimes instead of knocking some of the enemies in the pits, I do kind of farm them a little bit for points, but it's legit farming. It's not like the glitch. That's why I put no one-up farming, because I'm not really farming in the traditional sense of you know, the infinite life glitch where you can farm infinite lives, basically, if you want to wait there for hours. Now, it does take about an hour to farm 8 lives, so it's not a fast method at all. But I actually sat there for 1 fucking hour on my previous 1cc run where I farmed 8 lives. I sat there for an hour. I was fucking listening to YouTube videos and shit on my tablet while I just held the button down. But it's very fucking long to do that. And for me, that's really, at that point, wasn't legit for me. I mean, it was overkill, you know. So for this guy, you can kind of just kick him and then, you know, just immediately run or walk behind him and then just start hitting him into the water. But if he doesn't cooperate, it's not a big deal because, you know, you can still, as long as he doesn't throw you into the water, which he will do. But if you can get that hit where he's, you know, that stronger stun where his mouth is open really wide and he's bent over, that's when you can walk past him and start comboing him from the back. Now, as usual, you can always kick an enemy and then hit him once with the stick, and that's an instant knockdown when you're using the sticks. So that's a good way to get a knockdown. You can also knock enemies in this hole. You saw for the first Abobo that appeared, I just simply ran at him and comboed him with the stick immediately because I knew he was there. And that'll knock him into the water pretty quickly. But you do have the option, if you want, to kind of fight these enemies a little bit longer with your weapons and rack up some more points if that's something you want to do. I didn't take that to the maximum because I knew I'd get enough, you know, I figured I'd get enough points, and I didn't want this to be another farming run. You know, the only farming I really do is within the normal confines of the game, you know, where the enemies have limited health. So I'm not doing anything cheap. I'm just, you know, I'm fighting enemies maybe a little bit longer than I would if I was just trying to kill them fast. If I wanted to wipe these enemies out really fast, I would have used that hole, and I could have knocked all those enemies in that little hole you see over there. But I wanted to get some points out of them, so I fought them normally with the weapons. So it's more crowd control, you know, trying to group enemies together. It's tough, you see, with the weapons, with these enemies being so aggressive. It can be tough. So once I get the weapons knocked out of my hand, I resort to the old tactic that I mentioned that works great for me, is having the enemies go into my uppercuts, basically. That's the most reliable thing I found to deal with the crowds. So, you know, I may do a knee launcher as well sometimes, but mostly moving slightly up or down and having the enemies go into my uppercuts. And once you get good at doing this, you'll be able to manage crowds pretty efficiently. It's a huge technique. And it's something that I didn't realize how efficient it was to keep spamming the uppercuts and moving slightly up or down. The enemies really fall for it. Because once on expert mode, if you're in front of an enemy, they're already hitting you. You know what I mean? There's like no time to react. So it's just something you got to learn. Crowd controlling on expert can be pretty tough, to say the least. But if you can get some distance, you know, and there's only 2 of these Lindas, you can kind of deal with them pretty easily. Just be aware that they may throw knives at you. That's the most dangerous thing about them. So you want to take them out fast. And if you're facing a Linda with a knife, you want to make sure you are mashing the striking button, because if they do throw a knife, you have a chance you can deflect it out of the air. Now I drop my weapons here, and I start spin kicking enemies off this cliff. Now, with this cliff, the way it works is, you can also lure enemies into the dynamite, but the cliff, the way that works is, you got to be low enough on the cliff, about the bottom half of the cliff, to get enemies into the pit. If it's a little too high, the enemies will just get knocked onto the bridge, and they will just jump back up. There's a bridge you can't see off screen, which you'll see when you're allowed to progress. Now, you can also use the flying knee launcher, the uppercut knee launch combo to get the guys out of there. But the easiest way to do it is the spinning kick. See, this is where you see me using the spinning kick for the cliffs. And you're going to see me do that a lot. See, I lured both of those Burmovs off into the pit. Now, whenever you deal with a guy with a rock, you want to kick him and then move down immediately. Same thing with, any kind of fast hit that you have. You want to do it and move down immediately, or you'll get hit by the rock, which takes a ton of health off of you. So you don't want to get hit by that rock. Another way to deal with guys that are holding rocks is to just do a quick running spin kick, since they can't counter your spin kick. So you can just run and spin kick them, or do a dive kick. So I pick up the weapon again and I go down to this bridge once I've launched the enemies off the cliff mostly. And I just lure out about 1 or 2 enemies at a time. And I don't go too far to the right of the screen, otherwise more enemies will spawn at the same time, making it much harder. Now eventually you do have to deal with about 3 or 4 enemies at once anyway on this part. But, I try to minimize that and take my time. Because I really didn't want to lose this life. I was on 6 lives. I really wanted to try to keep all my lives. But I did fuck up. Soon the lives farming spot is coming up, and I'm going to explain that, and I'm going to leave a link in my description of this video to show the glitch in its full glory. But I'm not going to show it here because this is a no farming run, but I'm going to show how to do the glitch. I'm just not going to follow through with it fully. Because see, the way the glitch works is it's something that I normally did to survive this mode. It wasn't I wasn't trying to farm lives when I did it initially. It's actually a really, really efficient way to play this part coming up. It's the safest way I found to play the part. So there was a purpose for it initially, but then somehow it turned into a infinite lives farming glitch, basically. So I'm going to try to detail how to trigger that, and you'll see that in a moment. But you're not going to see the extended version. You're just going to see me do it long enough to where I feel like I drain the enemy's health, decently enough. I didn't want to ride it out for too long in this playthrough. That defeated the whole purpose of the 1cc for me. But I would consider it pretty legit if you can get a 1cc just farming, maybe 2 lives in that spot. It's not bad if that's all you do is farm 2 lives. Then you're doing pretty damn well. Even 3 is not bad. But when you farm 8 lives, it's getting fucking cheap because that's basically 2 continues. So for this part with these 3 guys, it's not anything you haven't dealt with before, but it does get dangerous on this bridge. So you want to try to either get them to the edge and use the spin kicks, or usually for me, they're going to be all the way out on the left, so I'll try to launch them with flying knees sometimes. Now here's the farming trick and the farming spot. This is also the safest way to play this part that I found. So immediately disarm the guy with the rock. You do not want him walking around with that rock. So before you do this trick, you want to get rid of the rock. So now that it's over on the left side, it's mostly out of the way. Luckily, I didn't get knocked off the cliff, but I think I ended up losing a life here anyway. So now you want to get up here as soon as possible. Get up all the way on this upper right. You want to be all the way on the very edge of this little platform here, and you want to just mash kick. Now, for me, what I do is I immediately switch my kick button to rapid fire on my controller and just hold it down. I find that to be more consistent, but you can probably just mash the kick button, get the same result. If you're playing on an actual Game Boy Advance or don't have access to rapid fire, you don't really need it as far as I can tell. So now you see these guys are constantly walking into the kick. So you get a lot of points from this, and certain enemies will not die if you get lucky and do it right. Now sometimes the farming trick doesn't work as planned and you're not able to do it. And what I mean by doing the farming trick is I mean when the enemies have infinite health, it seems like. And you can do it for an hour straight. So, I mean, you probably do it for hours straight. I'm sure you could probably max out the lives doing it. I don't think the enemies have... it seems like they're given infinite health for whatever reason, because you can kill them in one hit if you stop doing the kicks, which I will show. So immediately get back on you got to go in front of the door to spawn the next wave of enemies, which is 2 Burmovs and a Linda. But as soon as you spawn them, get up on that upper cliff, that upper ledge again, and just keep mashing kick. The Linda will die, but the 2 Burmovs here, if you do it right, and I guess you get kind of lucky because sometimes it does fuck up, you can fight these Burmovs forever. Now one might die, but the other one may live forever if you keep mashing kick. The best way to do it is if you have both Burmovs going into your kick at the same time. They will speed up the scoring process a little bit and cut your time down a little bit, your farming time. But you're still going to be there for a long fucking time if you want a lot of lives from this. But this is the way to get as many lives as you need. Now, the trade-off for this, of course, is you still have to be a good player to get this far on 1cc. If you're doing a 1cc run, you still got to make it to the end of stage 5, which is still, more than halfway through the game. So, I mean, you still have to, you can't play like shit. You still have to do pretty well. But it trivializes the 1cc, because if that's all you have to do to get a 1cc, then you pretty much already won by the time you get here. So, I wasn't happy with that. I wanted a real proper 1cc. And you'll see I got down to the last life. I died 15 times. It was down to 0 lives. So this was as close as it could be, pretty much. So again, make sure you disarm the guy with the rock. Always do that. Sometimes what you want to do is either throw the rock off screen to the left or throw the rock up on the platform so that the enemies can't get to it. Now sometimes you're going to have to watch out for dynamite and you're not going to want to stay on the platform depending on what wave you're dealing with. Now this time the main boss of the area actually came out, which normally he doesn't come out, so I don't think I would have been able to farm during this wave, because if the green guy dies, this farming is done. Everybody dies when the green guy dies. He's the main boss. So, but you saw that I had 2 Burmovs earlier going in that infinite loop, which I believe would have went on probably forever. And you'll notice that after I kicked the Burmovs for a long time, I just did a dive kick and finished them off in one dive kick. That wasn't because I knew exactly how much health they had and I killed them in one perfect hit. It was because after a while, it seems like their health just becomes infinite. But if you break out of the farming combo that you see here and do a regular move, it kills them in one hit. So it's definitely a glitch as far as I can tell. And it's up to you how much you want to exploit it. I would say, it is technically legit because it's in the game. It's pretty much a developer oversight, I would say. It's probably a programming fuck up. But, it's definitely something you can use. You just have to decide how much you actually want to use it, that's all. Or if you want to use it at all. So now, this is where you really see how much better it is sometimes to not use the weapons. So I'm going to show you the use of the spin kicks. This is where I'm really going to demonstrate it. Now, I did have some sloppy shit where I lost 2 lives here, which is, not the best demonstration. I do show a deathless run of this stage in my practice sessions on the channel. But yeah, for this part, you want to do a running spin kick to cross that gap, and you'll knock one of them into the water usually. Then you want to try to knock the second one in there. A lot of times you will knock him over the gap, but if you do a regular punch combo with a regular uppercut, you can... now, after you land that spinning kick across the second gap, headbutt immediately. Otherwise, those guys will knock you in the water, so you got to do that. Now, see, I fucked up here and I jumped in the water. Normally, I wouldn't do that, but you get the idea. Just picture that part without me jumping into the water. You want to spin kick both of those guys on your left and right side into the water, as you see me doing here. It did get kind of sloppy here. But that's the idea. And most of the Abobo enemies, they go into the water. So that's the idea. Now, if you're comfortable with the launch combos, you can do it pretty close to the edge. But you got to make sure you're comfortable with the distance of it, because it's easy to launch yourself into the water. One of my biggest issues with the pit areas in the game is that I have a tendency to kind of inch my movement. And it makes me run a lot when I don't want to, and I've run into the water a bunch of times. So it's like it gets pretty fucking intense because I'm trying not to inch myself into the fucking lake. So you can launch this guy off the ledge here, and I believe if you do it right, you can get him in the water from this ledge. But I'm not sure if that's what I did here. Either way, it's very easy to deal with one of these guys. See, I got the launch off the ledge. I haven't put him in the water, so... Now you want to try to put all these enemies into the water with launchers. So, what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to do my double combo to launch all the enemies into the lake. I try to get them out, one at a time, and sometimes I group them together when I can. Like here, I got both of them, so that was good. But now you're going to see the spin kicks, how that works. It's the best knockback move in the game. The headbutt has such a short range, and it's not bad sometimes to knock guys back, but it's a little risky. But these spin kicks really trick guys. Now, I did fuck it up here again. That was my second fuck up. But Oh, yeah, fuck that. I lost like 3 lives here. Yeah, this was bad. I remember this was fucking sloppy. So you may want to check my deathless run of the stage. I posted, I think, 2 deathless runs of this stage when I was practicing. But you'll get the idea. You're going to see me do it with a bunch of fucking abobos that come out. It's like a fucking circus of abobos that come out of this door. So now, normally I would take all those sword guys out with the spinning kicks and group them all and get them into the lake, but I totally fucked it up. But see, now you're going to see the trick. So I'll try to group all these guys. It really wasn't, the cleanest stage for me, but you take what you can get when you're going for these fucking 1cc runs. It's already kind of an extreme mode, and you're trying to do an extreme challenge on an extreme mode, so that's why it was so fucking hard. But yeah, it's a little tricky to try to dance around these guys when they get, they get into the edge of the screen, which is dangerous. But I was able to manage it. What I do is I try to hit them out from the edge of the screen when I can, but I didn't need to do that, I don't believe. I was able to manage them all with the spinning kicks, but it wasn't the cleanest. Things did get messy there. But you can't always, I don't think you can always get it consistent. So yeah, that clears that stage, but I recommend checking, maybe I'll post a link to my Deathless Stage 6 so I can show you a better demonstration. I'll put some links in the description. I didn't want to make this tutorial too long by adding a ton of clips to the end of it, as I do sometimes. I figured I would just try to focus on the 1cc run. And of course, I have more details in my other tutorial I made on this game, but this one is better if you're just trying to survive the game and you want to survive a 1cc or something like that, because this shows real strategies that are really used, in the heat of the moment. So basically, I like to get in this area here, and I like to spin kick most of the enemies into the pits. So, some of them also go into the fire, but see, I fucked up there. It's easy to get knocked into the spikes yourself when the enemies go on the edge. I don't think I really got my positioning perfect, but the idea is to try to spin kick as many of these enemies as you can from this position and get them all into the spikes. Now, of course, for some reason, if you wanted to try to farm these guys for points, go ahead with that shit. But I think it's a lot safer to just try to kill them as fast as possible. Because I would rather just do better on other parts of the game and have more lives by this point than try to do that. It's a lot of enemies to deal with. One of these enemies is going to drop these sticks. Well, the main issue is not so much the number of enemies, but it's, you have such narrow platforms to work with and there's traps. So what I do is I go down here and skip that fire-breathing dragon trap, and then I jump back up here. And now what I do is I launch these enemies into the pit. This is a really good way to get them in the pit. You're going to see there's 2 Burmovs here and a bunch of hard enemies. But if you get your positioning right, you can put all these guys into the pit. So this is a really effective way to deal with multiple waves of enemies. It's 2 big waves of enemies at least that you can clear out. Now I did fuck up. This wasn't the cleanest run. I've had much better runs of this stage, but you get the idea. Just try to do it better. But this is the general strategy that I recommend and that I use. So you're not going to see the best execution of my strategies since it was done in one single segment. It wasn't like a save state run. So, but see, I try to launch these guys from the left edge. I'm launching them. You can even launch them at the edge of the screen, as you saw me do. And I'm trying to launch them all off screen. What that does is, if you launch guys left to the edge of the screen, they all go into spikes. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm trying to get them positioned so that I wanted to get the right guy off my ass, so I launched him to the right just to get him off of me. But ideally, I want to try to launch the guys, into the left side of the screen, into the spikes. So that's my goal here. Now I was able to get some positioning and move to the other side by uppercutting both enemies and then moving to the right and getting behind them and launching them in the opposite direction into the spikes. So now the idea with these abobos is similar. Now if you want, you can try fighting them with the sticks and get some extra points, but that's up to you. I didn't want to bother with that, so my goal here was to try to launch them into the spikes on the left side. You can put everybody in the spikes mainly. In this stage, you can put almost everybody into the spikes, which is great if you do it right. But I didn't get everybody in, but I tried to get most of them in there. Of course, if they're not cooperating with you, you don't have a lot of room to move. You can try running past them to get behind them and then try to group them, like this. But see, he interrupted my launch. But you can try doing that to re-get your possession. But the AI is very fucking sneaky in this game. And they don't cooperate and do things you want them to do a lot of times. They really try to fuck with you. I was surprised by how smart the AI seems to be in this game. But, make sure... Now, the primary goal of this stage is to never lose those fucking sticks. And I don't recommend the nunchuck because it has a weird combo where you do this stepping motion and it can really fuck up my strategies. My strategies for this stage is to keep the stick for the whole stage. Now, if I lose the stick on this stage, my whole run is pretty much done. And it's very easy to lose the stick. So what you want to do is, if you're going to get hit, make sure you're in the middle of the screen. You do not want to be on the left or right edge of the screen where they can knock the sticks off screen. And then you cannot get them. There's only one set of sticks and one set of nunchucks. So, if you can't get the stick, then get the nunchuck. But other than that, for the strategy, for the way I fight these guys, I rely on the sticks. I really don't have a good strategy without the sticks. I mean, I would try to uppercut them as I normally do, getting them to step into my uppercuts, but it's very unreliable because they'll block it a lot of times, and it's a fucking mess. So my run is pretty much done if I lose the sticks for this stage. I probably should have a better backup plan, but that's just how I played it. I figured, if I lose the sticks, then I'm pretty much going to be fucked. But I was confident enough that eventually I would, get here and keep the sticks. And for the 8th stage, it's also pretty essential to keep the sticks. For the last 2 stages, it's pretty much required for my strategies. So my strategy, as I detailed in my previous tutorial, is actually the same that I detailed in my original tutorial. It's one of the only strategies that I didn't change. I got better at the game overall, but my strategy is very similar. And it's basically the back against the wall technique, I call it, where you mainly keep your back against either the left or right wall. And by doing that, the enemies, if they do try to get behind you, you can actually hit them with the back of your stick and move them forward into the right position. So the danger of fighting these guys like this is that one of them may be in the middle of a spinning kick while the other isn't, and it'll offset the timing and you'll get knocked back. But if you can stand over them and group them as soon as they come out of the door, you can even kill them like this where they never get a chance to spread out their clones. But unfortunately, I fucked up and they did get a chance to spread out and multiply. But if you do it right, you can actually avoid that altogether. But I wasn't able to keep it going till the end. See, now, this is where things get harder whenever this happens. Now, a little tip. Whenever the clones come out, they're very fast to kill. They don't take a lot of hits to kill. So the best way to kill the clones when they come out, if you want to clear them out, is just use a jumping spin kick. And it'll kill multiple of them. They're usually grouped very close together. It'll take out multiple of them at once. So if you want to clear them out. Now, as far as this shadow that moves on the ground, this hits me pretty much every time. I believe there is a way to jump it at the exact moment and dodge it, but I almost never do that. I think I have also dodged it by running a certain way, but I pretty much never dodge it, and it doesn't do much damage to you, but if you're about to die, it will finish you off. So it is fucking irritating. And it will break you out of your combos when you're trying to group the guys together. That's why it's always better to try to take these guys out before they can get up each time, by standing over them. And it's the same thing when you see them twitch as they're standing up, start mashing the stick button. Again, don't use rapid fire because you're going to do extra strikes with a rapid fire controller, and it'll just fuck you up. I don't recommend that at all. I did play like that initially, but it was fucking up my combos. We're trying to do the uppercut launch combo I couldn't do properly, and it was making me do extra moves with the weapons and even regular strikes. And I was getting fucking, I would do well, but then I would get fucking destroyed because I missed an extra hit. On Expert, you really don't have a lot of room to fuck around on the 1cc, so you have to have everything really tight. So same strategy with all these groups of clones. It's basically to get the stick and try to keep your back against the wall. I did fuck up a lot here. I've had much better runs of it, and you can see some of that in my original tutorial and in some of the practice sessions I've posted. But I'll post some highlights in the links below. I'll post a few different videos, some extra resources about, my strategies anyway, that I ended up using and liking the best. So, of course, the shadow version is the one that you don't have to kill. Most of these you don't have to even fight. It's usually the one that's like the brightest. I believe that's the only one that actually But the weird thing is there's a few of them that are bright, so it kind of confuses me as to which one is the real one. But the shadow ones seem like to always be the optional ones, so you can at least narrow it down by that. Of course, use the spin kick to clear out any extra clones, and try to single them out if you can. And try to use the technique of standing over them and hitting them. This is the hardest. This is the hardest boss section in the game with all these clones that come out. It's really easy to fuck up and get surrounded by these guys. They can be really aggressive, but if you use that strategy, it can make things a lot more manageable. It's not going to make them easy, but it does make it a lot more manageable. So now we are on the final stage. And though these guys look very easy, as you would normally deal with these guys, they seem hyper-aggressive to me. I don't know, maybe it was just me. And they also throw tons of dynamite. The problem with, the bullshit with their dynamite that they throw is that when they throw the fucking dynamite, it explodes immediately. When you throw it, there's a huge delay. So, whenever you see them throwing dynamite, just get the fuck away from them. Don't even get near them. You don't want to be on the same plane as them. Now, if you get up in this corner, sometimes you can get them all in a little huddle here where they try to group in on your position. But once the dynamite falls, you can get grabbed and, you can get fucking detonated. So you don't want that. You can see I'm already down to 2 lives. It shows 1, but I have actually 2 lives here. So it's already getting really, really close and really intense. So it's going to be similar strategies. It probably would have been better if I would have stuck to my uppercut strategy as I'm now doing. I'm going back to the dancing with the uppercut strategy. It doesn't do as much damage, but it's the more patient way to play it. So if you're having trouble, put the weapon down. Make sure you pick up those sticks, though, because you're going to need them for the final boss. The final boss and the boss area. So I require that you have the sticks for the final part of my strategy. Losing the sticks can be very easily a game over at this point in the last 2 stages. Now, I like to fly in with a jump kick to get into this group of guys and kind of let the traps and dynamite take them out. But it does become kind of a mess, so just be careful here. Luckily, I didn't fuck up too bad initially, but I do end up dying here, and I make sure to grab the sticks and just get the fuck out after I die. I don't know how to dodge this double spear consistently. I've only done it a few times in all my time playing the game. So you're going to see me get killed by it. I think it takes like half your health if you get hit by it. You may die on this part. So there's like pretty much 2 guaranteed deaths, or at least 1 guaranteed death on this final stage. One is the timer. It has a fucked up timer that's not adjusted for expert mode. So you're most likely going to run out of time at least once and lose a life from that. Because remember, enemies take about twice as much damage or more on expert mode as they do on normal. But the timer isn't changed. So, that's going to be a big problem. The timer's going to run out. It only happens on this stage for some reason. So, when you do die from that spear, which you most likely will, be sure to grab your nunchucks or your sticks while you have temporary invincibility. Grab them and just get the fuck out. And you saw the first Abobo, I was able to get into the spikes by going back to the left side and luring them down. So, do that for an easy kill or farm them for points if you want to. But I wasn't really thinking too much about farming at this point in the game. Because I had another 45,000 points that I would need to get the next life. And, that's a lot to try to farm. I figured I might get it on the next, because there's a massive horde of enemies coming up. But, I wasn't too concerned with that. I was just trying to survive at this point. But yeah, the survival strategies are very different from what I had in my original tutorial because, you're not worried about trying to farm up points from the enemies or get extra lives or anything like that. You're just trying to, when you use save states to make a tutorial, you can get each section perfect, but it's not, indicative of what a real run would be like. You know what I mean? It's a lot harder to execute that shit in the heat of the moment because you can just keep reloading the state indefinitely until you get it the way you want. So, well, it's probably not as heavily cheated as the long play channel, World of Long Plays, where they can basically rewind and get identical, inputs that they want. It's still, it's still very different. Now, of course, when I do shit like that with my tutorials, I always go into great detail about how I made the tutorial. I don't claim it to be any kind of, no death run, because it only shows 1 death in that tutorial. So I don't claim it to be any kind of no death run. And the 1 death that it shows is from the timer running out, obviously, in the last stage. But, I don't make any kind of false claims or cheat. You know what I mean? I always am transparent about what I do in the channel with all the playthroughs. So here it's the back against the wall technique, and this is a lot more fun to deal with than than the clones, as far as I'm concerned. I find this overall actually a lot easier to deal with. But things can still go really wrong. Now, the best thing with the back against the wall technique, even on the clones, is to try to stay in the upper left or upper right corner, because all the enemies will group into the corners. And they also group against the edge of the wall. Now, unfortunately, there's no good area here really to line up all the enemies into a single line. I mean, you can try to actually, if you want to do it, try to get pixel perfect with the bottom of the screen where the spikes are and have the enemies come in a straight line. It kind of groups them into a straight line, but I find it much safer to keep my back against the wall. Now, I use occasional other techniques and things to keep things going because sometimes I get the sticks knocked out of my hand, but I try to keep the sticks whenever I can. Now, be aware that certain types of deaths will cause you to lose your weapon. It is rare, but it happens. One of them is if your timer runs out while you're holding the weapon, your weapon is fucking gone. So if your timer's about to run out, if you're down to 5 seconds or 4 seconds, drop the sticks and just fight normally, and just let the timer run out that way, because you don't want to lose the sticks for this part. So be aware of that. Be ready to drop the sticks. You're most likely going to run out of time unless you get killed prematurely, but there's a good chance you're going to run out of time. So now, as far as normal deaths go, most of the time you won't lose the sticks, but I think certain types of deaths you will lose the stick. I think maybe if you get a knife thrown at you and it kills you while you're holding the stick, because it's not a knockback kind of death, it's kind of a death where you kind of hold your stomach and fall to the ground. I think because of that, you'll lose your sticks. But if it's a knockback type of death where you get knocked back and drop the weapon as you die, then you don't lose your weapon as far as I can tell. So keep those things in mind when trying to keep your weapon. Obviously, you want to always stay in the middle of the screen if you're at the edge of a screen where the weapons could get knocked off screen. You really have to remember that in stages 7 and 8, where it's pretty much, those are the only 2 stages where it's essential to keep the weapons for my strategy. So the run is going to be pretty fucked. Now, the last stage is more survivable without a weapon than the previous stage. The clones are just so fucking difficult. This stage, you could actually fight all these enemies without a weapon. It's going to be a lot harder, but it's doable. You don't have to die a ton. If you're decent with the crowd control and you've used everything that we learned so far that I mentioned, and you get good with the general crowd control, you're going to be able to deal with all these enemies. But it's going to be hard initially when there's a shit ton of enemies at once. That part is tough without the weapons. You're going to have to just try to use the uppercuts and thin guys out and get in the hits when you can. Now, of course, these are the hardest and most irritating enemies in the game. But with the weapon, you can try to group them together. And, just try to take them out that way. Of course, by this point, you know that after they finish their punch combo, you can attack them easily. You don't want to try to attack them until they do their punch combo, unless you're pretty certain that they're going to walk into your strike. But what I try to do is I always try to lure them to attack. I stand just in front of them, about a foot in front of them, and that will make them do their punch combo in the air. They do their little shadow boxing routine. And after they finish that and straighten their tie is when you attack them. You can even walk behind them as they're straightening their tie and launch them in the opposite direction if you're trying to launch them in pits like in the truck stage. So now things get intense. I have 2 lives left, but I'm about to lose this life. So I'm going to be down to life 0. And as I said, playing normally like I did here without any farming, I had 15 lives to work with. So you're allowed to die 15 times if you play like I did. But it may vary a little bit because depending if you get more points off certain enemies, your score might be a little different. So it's probably going to vary. But I think that's a pretty good estimate. Figure maybe 13 to 15 lives that you have to work with, depending how you play it. Now here I'm shaking the numbness out of my hands. It gets to the point where I can't feel the directional pad. So I've had in my playthroughs walking in the pits and things like that. I just need to shake the numbness out sometimes. So that's why I was pausing. Sometimes it's good to pause just to collect your thoughts as well, but I already knew what I was going to do here. So it is dangerous to stand on top of these guys because sometimes they'll instantly throw you. But very similar strategy here. Their most dangerous move is that shoulder charge they do. It's very dangerous because it's very fast and it easily breaks through shit. So it can get in between those gaps where your strikes are. It'll sneak in. But at this point, we've dealt with much worse, so this is not too bad. You should be able to finish off all these regular hordes of enemies. Now here comes the final boss and his two Abobos, which seem to take a lot of extra damage than usual. But the idea is to try to initially group them up when they come out of the door and use the sticks to do a lot of initial damage. Now I've done much better before with that, but this got sloppy. I have a no damage run of the final boss on Expert, which I will... it'll be in the tutorial that I link. I'll link the second tutorial where I use save states, so you can see some different strategies. If you're interested, it shows a no damage run of this final boss fight. And some very well-executed clone fights as well in other areas with no deaths aside from the timer. So it's a very clean Expert run. But as I said, it's not legit. But it does show what can be done, with legit playing. So here I ran out of time, as is usual the case, but luckily I had my final life here. And it started to get kind of dangerous, and, nerves, I started to play kind of shittier too. But I did end up getting it. So that was fucking satisfying to finally break through. So Machine Gun Willie here is really not that difficult, but if he hits you with his machine gun, which is a pretty fast move if you're away from him, it does massive damage. I don't believe it kills you in one hit like it does in the arcade version of the game, but Willie lays still from exhaustion is really all you need to know. But yeah, same strategy with Willie. You basically get either slightly above or below and try to get him into your stick combos. And another thing I do is when Willie is knocked down, I will run through his body on the ground and switch sides to get behind him so he doesn't have a chance to try to strike me. It works very well. We're trying to move him around the arena. But I didn't pull it off too well. You'll see a much better explanation of that method and some other things in my other tutorial, which I'll link here. So if you have any other questions, let me know, and thanks for watching.